Every day, people get up and get ready for an ordinary day. But here at UT Dallas, our days are beyond ordinary. 50 years ago, our innovations and experiments helped with NASA's history-making missions. And in the years since, we've become one of the fastest-growing universities and one of the brightest stars in Texas. As a Tier 1 institution, we are all about the doing that makes innovation possible. And thanks to those innovations, children are given the miracle of hearing. Cancer detection and treatment are being transformed. Robotics are shaping the future for surgical procedures. Big ideas are becoming businesses, and art is bringing cultures together. We didn't build this, all of this, in 50 years. Instead, we did it at the speed of bright.
Welcome to the Research Showcase Poster Competition. Throughout today's show, you will be able to participate in several interactive polls and activities, including voting for your favorite finalists. So grab your cell phone and follow along with me as we go over the instructions on how you can participate in today's show using Poll Everywhere. Step 1. Open the text messaging app on your smartphone and start a new text message. Step 2, enter the following number, 37607 in the To section. Step 3, enter UTD Research 004 where you type a new text message, then hit send. Remember, messaging data rates may apply. Step 4, wait for it. You will receive a response back from Poll Everywhere that looks like this. Congratulations! You successfully joined the Poll Everywhere for this event. You are now ready to participate in the activities and vote for your favorite finalist at the end of the show. So keep your cell phone close and get ready to vote. We will begin this Research Showcase poster competition after a word from our sponsor.
Campus was quiet. We think about what used to be and how everything just seemed to stop. Places that were once bustling became so very still. But in reality, campus was a lot busier than it appeared. Busy adapting so that we could keep innovating. Busy adjusting and preparing for your safe return. Busy with new ways to connect and stay united. At UT Dallas, our people really do make the place. For 50 years, we've been opening our doors to people like you, the ones who will change the world. This university remains the same in one very important way. It was built not just for today, but for tomorrow and what the future might hold. When this time of quiet ends, we can be stronger together. More resilient, closer and more connected than we were before. When campus is filled with the sounds of your voices, we'll never want to hear the quiet again.
Welcome to the 2020 Research Showcase Poster Competition. Our fierce finalists competing today are Janine Alpert, Luis Fernando Calunga-Ramos, Brent Dell, Marcela Nava, Leslie Stanaland, Yanan Wu. You are all members of our live studio audience, so get ready to vote for your favorite contestant at the end of our show. Now take it away, Dr. Pancrazio.
My name is Joe Pancrazio, and I serve as the Vice President for Research at the University of Texas at Dallas. And it's my privilege to welcome you to our Research Showcase poster competition, which is coming to you live from the North Dallas area in the great state of Texas. Today we'll be featuring outstanding young scientists from UT Dallas who are from our School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences, which we call EPPS. EPPS aims to be a national leader in research addressing critical social, political, and economic issues in the country and throughout the world. Joining us in this event are faculty, students, and alumni from EPPS, and very importantly, our viewing audience from all over the world. So thank you for tuning in today. Each of today's 6 contestants is a PhD student. And to be sure, we are proud of each of them as we are proud of our more than 1,500 doctoral students at UT Dallas. We know that our research success as a university, and I speak as a professor as well as a VP of research, is directly tied to the outstanding and diverse graduate students who joined us from all over the globe. Now, this event today is important because it's not just about science. It's about the ability to communicate complex science to a general audience. I consider PhD graduates to be our research leaders, and the ability to communicate science is critical to becoming effective leaders. We live in a time of tremendous change when social media makes it difficult to separate fact from opinion. So it's never been more important in our world to have scientists who can not only conduct state-of-the-art research, but also communicate it effectively to the public. Now, for those of you in the viewing audience, you're not off the hook. You have an important and very active role. You'll be casting your vote to determine who will be crowned our champion. Helping us evaluate our contestants are a panel of celebrity judges. You'll hear more about them in a little bit. Now, you'll be able to vote live in real time via text messaging for your favorite finalist. Okay, and we'll get into more details about how you do that later in this show. My legal team here in the Office of Research, and I've got several people, has asked that I tell everyone the following. Quote, any resemblance of this production to actual persons, events, or popular American TV shows like American Idol is purely, entirely, and completely coincidental. Well, sort of. So before I turn the event over to our MC, Dr. Lanham from EPPS, let me wish our contestants good luck and hope that they are truly in it to win it. Take it away, Carol.
Thank you, Dr. Pancrazio. I'm your host, Carol Cerulli Lanham, the Assistant Dean in EPPS, and this is the Research Showcase Poster Competition sponsored by the UT Dallas Office of Research. As you just heard, this event showcases the outstanding work of graduate students in the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences. Today's 6 finalists will soon be taking the stage to present their research, followed by questions and comments from our VIP judges. The competition will run like American Idol. After all the contestants present their poster, the power will be in your hands. The audience gets to vote for their top 3 favorite finalists via text or online, so you get to decide who wins. We'll be providing directions on how to vote throughout the show, and we have a few activities and polls that you can participate in as well, so you get to practice along the way. Be sure you check out the event chat so you can receive additional messages from our production staff. And now I'd like to welcome our VIP judges. First off, we have Dr. Jennifer Holmes, the Dean of the School of Economic, Political, and Policy Sciences, and she has been a UT Dallas faculty member since 1998. Her major areas of research are political violence, terrorism, and political development, with an emphasis on Latin America, especially Colombia and Peru. In 2011, she received the UT System Regents Outstanding Teaching Award, an honor reserved for faculty across the UT system who are recognized for exemplary service to students. Dean Holmes, welcome. Now please help me welcome Dr. Alero Akaporye. She is a 2014 graduate of the PhD program in public policy and political economy here in EPPS. And Dr. Akaporye is an assistant professor of political economy at the Rhode Island School of Design. She studies the political economy of multinational corporations, the political economy of oil extraction, corporate social responsibility, human rights, and experimental methods in international political economy. We're excited to have you, Dr. Akaporia. Next up is Dr. Kyle Cheek. He is a clinical associate professor of information and decision sciences at the University of Illinois at Chicago and the director of the Center for Applied Analytics. He has worked in both industry and academics and is now focused on applications of machine learning and deep learning to various operational areas of healthcare. Dr. Cheek is another alum of our school here in EPPS. He graduated from the doctoral program in public policy and political economy in 1996. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Cheek. And welcome to all three of our judges. We'll now be getting started with our competition. So I'd like to introduce our first finalist, Janine Alpert. Janine is a doctoral student in public policy and political economy, and our faculty advisors are Dr. Bobby Alexander and Dr. Richard Scotch. So let's get to know Janine a bit before she tells us about her research. Janine, can you tell us a little about where you work and why you chose this particular field?
Yeah, so your question, Dr. Landon, was what do I do? Essentially, I work with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Collin County and through post-high school education programming. And I've been a social worker for close to 30 years. So I've been in the field mostly all of my career. And so this has been an experience for me to work in academia and work towards my PhD.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. Now, please tell us a little bit about your research.
Sure. I'm pleased to share my research. Again, it's about post-high school programming with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I used a descriptive phenomenological approach to my research, essentially to ask the question, what is the essential or most significant common lived experience for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities at my possibilities, and how do they undergo this experience and what's their perception of it? So I conducted 51 interviews over 18 months, had 42 observations, as well as some COVID responses when COVID hit, through 22 participants, 6 of them whom were hipsters. So you might ask, what's a hipster? Hipsters are what My Possibilities calls. They're adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They're referred to as hugely important people. So you'll hear me refer to them as I go through this program. So we had 6 hipsters. 50% were Down syndrome, 50% were autism spectrum, 4 were male, 2 were female. So what I did through gathering all those interviews, I used qualitative software called In Vivo and transcribed all of the interviews and put them into that software package and really started using word frequency reports, which is just about word usage, to come up with where were the impact areas these people were sharing about attending My Possibilities. We identified 5 areas: independence, quality of life, empowerment, maintenance, and employment. And that really helped me frame what I was looking for as I move forward. I then used the averages of the word usage to figure out what was most important for the people that were attending or were parents or were instructors. And quality of life was really the most important area from this particular group, these particular 3 groups, with employment being the least important. I then would look at it across time as well as individually, and again, that just sort of mirrored all the way through the 18 months that quality of life was most important. So from there, I put significant statements into what are called nodes in the In Vivo, and they're like buckets or categories where you can take significant statements and start to really look at and start to understand what people are saying. So I went from 5 impact areas to 9 impact areas, adding non-attendance, trouble spots, exposure, and MP experience. This just gave a deeper context of what I was looking at. From there, started to look at the context of these significant statements, put in the observations as well as the COVID-19 responses that I got, from parents about inclusion, and 4 emerging themes came about from all that analysis. And so I'll share what those emerging themes are. The first was an active learning community and program value. Basically what that meant to the hipsters, the instructors, and the parents that participated was the hipsters were very proud of being in college, is what they would call it. They get to choose their own classes. It is 13-week semester. The parents were learning what their children were capable of, and the instructors were engaging the hipsters in their learning. The program value really had to do with where there were suggestions for improvement, and this really came out of the functionality of the group. That those that maybe were higher functioning wished for different type of classes than those that maybe weren't as high functioning. So that was an area that MP could look at. Social network and social capital really doesn't surprise anybody that people got their social skills or their social interactions from people at school. But what this really translated into was building social capital while on campus. So leadership skills, the ability to advocate for themselves. And then surprisingly that this translated out into the community with hipsters trying things that they were doing on campus out in the community where they wouldn't have before. Leads to the next emerging theme, which is called the safe haven and the push. And essentially, hipsters talked about feeling welcome and understood and accepted for their humanness at my possibilities and being treated as an adult, which was very important. And so then they took on challenges, or the push, as a parent described it, to do things that maybe people thought they couldn't do. The last was self-management, and this really was an instructor and parent-driven approach, was just about treating them as adults and having them be responsible for their behaviors. And having pro-social behaviors. So those were the four emerging themes. The thing about the contributions of this is really allowing adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities to speak for themselves. And hopefully we'll go ahead and continue that trend and use this information to help MP develop a national model. Some of the limitations, or what I would expect for future research, just need a larger sample size, and probably diversity of race and gender would be helpful.
Thank you so much, Janine. Now let's hear from our judges. Dean Holmes, how do you think Janine did?
I think she did great. I've heard a lot about my possibilities, both through Janine and other contexts I have there. I guess my question for her would be, you're looking at a range of things they do here and what is scalable. So from your research, what do you think the most impactful best practice that could be more broadly applied across the country? Which one do you think you would advocate?
I really think the active learning community is probably the most broadly or scalable concept. Oftentimes adults with IDD are told what to do, even as adults, and so including them in the design of their education post-high school is probably the one thing that everybody can get on board with and understand that there's a way to do that and do that well.
All right, thank you, Dean Holmes. Let's go next to Dr. Akporiyaya. And what do you think about how Janine did?
I think she did very well. Thank you for that presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm curious about how the pandemic affected your data collection methods, given that we've all had to adapt in various ways. So, maybe I could learn something from you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, all the interviews and everything and observations were complete when the pandemic hit. So what I then had to do was reach out remotely. So mostly was through emails and to get response to additional questions as a result of the closure of the school for 11 weeks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And let's go next to Dr. Cheek. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no question. It's just a couple of comments. I think one, the presentation was very nicely done. Enjoyed that and actually learned quite a bit. I think just 3 things. I think you framed the problem very well. You made it easy to follow the rest of the presentation based on the problem statement. I think you described the methodological approach in a very intuitive way, so it made it easy to understand how you were trying to get your results, and I think you framed the results very nicely as well. So overall, good job.
Thank you.
Yes, good job, Janine. Now I want to invite the audience to participate in an activity to help warm you up for voting at the end of the show. So grab your cell phone and let's get started. So as you see on your screen, first you're going to open up your texting app on your phone and start a new text. Then enter the number 37607 in the to section. Next, you'll enter the word UTD Research 004, where you type a new text message, and then you go ahead and tap send there, and you'll receive a response back from Poll Everywhere, and now you know you're ready to participate in our activities. So you can see the directions right there on your screen, and now we're gonna just practice with an easy one. So let's start out by having you text which city you're watching this competition from. And we'll be seeing the names show up here. The bigger the word, the more people there are from this particular city. So we see Bloomington, we see Allen just up the road, Richardson looking very big. I'm on campus here in Richardson as well, on the UT Dallas campus. I see Coppell and Plano. Rumford, which I'm not sure exactly where that is. And I see I'm not alone on the UTD campus. We've got viewers from Chicago, Houston. This is exciting to see all the different places. I wonder if we have anyone from a different country. So far, I'm just seeing the surrounding areas and some cities in the US. Oklahoma. And yeah, so it looks like most of our viewers are in Plano. So welcome everybody. And this way you got to practice and you know how to vote at the end of our competition. So now we're going to go to our next finalist, Luis Fernando Calunga Ramos. And Fernando is a PhD student in the Department of Economics. And his faculty advisor is Dr. Victor Valcarcel. And Fernando, before you tell us about your research, can you share with the audience why you chose to go into the field of economics?
Yes, of course. Before coming here to UT Dallas, I was working in the Mexico Central Bank, and in that experience, I was able to learn about time series, monetary policy, and then after that, I think that was a determinant for me to choose the PhD in economics at UT Dallas.
All right. Well, Fernando, why don't you tell us a little bit about your research now?
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Fernando and I'm going to present a divisa measure of the money supply for Mexico, and I'm going to explain what is a divisa measure. What is money? First of all, what is money? The Banco de Mexico, like any other central bank, they define money as the set of assets that we use to make transactions, to buy and sell goods and services. Right now, the central bank, Mexico Central Bank, like any other central bank, they measure money just as a simple sum of different monetary assets: cash, money in a saving accounts, money in a checking accounts, and some other assets. Seminal work by Barnett and some others, they have demonstrated that these simple sums, this aggregation is highly problematic, and I'm going to explain why. More than that, there are many papers that they have demonstrated that the divisa indices, like the one that we built for Mexico, is not only theoretically, but also empirically superior to the simple sum counterparts, and I'm going to explain why. Here it is, what we have. The central banks, what they do is just a simple sum, a simple aggregation of different monetary assets: cash, money in a checking account, and money in a saving account. However, these assets, they are different. As a result, the literature suggests that this simple sum is wrong. The implicit assumption is that these assets, they are perfect substitutes, which means that we can use cash as money from a saving account, which is not true. You can use cash that you have right now and use it immediately, but you may not use the money that you have in a saving account like cash right now. So because these assets, they are different in terms of the degree of liquidity, we need to weight each monetary asset by the degree of liquidity. And this is the Divisa index. It is a weighted sum in which for each monetary asset, we are going to have a weight. And that weight is going to be a function of the liquidity of each monetary asset. This is pretty much what we do. In our Divisa index, we aggregate more than 20 monetary assets. Here, we only have 3, just to have an example. So our contribution is gonna be that we're gonna be the first to produce that index for Mexico. And the second contribution is that we're gonna use that Divisa index as a monetary policy indicator. And I'm gonna show you why, how. Here we have the results. Look, when we aggregate monetary assets that they are pretty similar in terms of liquidity, like cash and money in a checking accounts, Divisa, which is the blue line, and the simple sum, they are pretty similar because the monetary assets that we are aggregating, they are pretty similar in terms of the liquidity degree. However, when we start to aggregate some other monetary assets like money in a saving account, because money in a saving account is different to cash with respect to the liquidity degree, Divisa is different from the simple sum. Now that we have this index, we're going to use it as a monetary policy indicator. Let's suppose that the central bank is concerned because inflation is increasing, prices, they are going up. So they may say, let's increase the interest rate. And in that way, we're going to reduce consumption and investment, the aggregate demand is going to go down, and prices, they are going to go down. This is what the textbook suggests that is going to happen. However, the evidence suggests that it may happen the opposite. And when it happens the opposite, we have a price puzzle or a puzzle response. Our contribution is that if we replace this monetary policy indicator by our Divisa index, we're going to solve that price puzzle. And let's see how. Here we have, if we use the interest rate, if we increase the interest rate to try to decrease prices, look what happens. The response of prices is positive. Prices, they go up. If we use this specification in which we include commodity prices in the set of variables, look, the response for prices is positive. Now, let's use our Divisa index. Let's use our Divisa index and look, how is the response of the prices? It's negative, so we solve the price puzzle. More than that, if we use the inflation rate instead of the price level, look, if we increase the interest rate, we have the inflation puzzle because the inflation rate goes up. This is not what the central bank they want. Now, if we use our Divisa index, look, the inflation rate eventually goes down. And in that way, we solve the price puzzle or the inflation puzzle. As a result, we conclude by saying that we're the first to produce that index in which we measure money in the correct way. And we would like that the central bank, they publish that index in the future. And we find that by using that Divisa index, we solve those price puzzles. Thank you so much.
Great job, Fernando. Let's see what our judges have to say. Dr. Akboriya, what do you think about what Fernando had to present today?
Thank you. I find the puzzle underlying the research extremely fascinating, Fernando. And my question for you is, what is the significance of your research for the average individual actor in the economy, such as a consumer or a business?
Right. Right now, the money in Mexico is more than 50% of the GDP, when 20 years ago it was 30% of the GDP. So it follows that the role of money in the economy has been increasing, right? As a result, we consider that we need to measure money in a correct way, like by the Divisa index, and not as a simple sum. More than that, when we use that Divisa index as a monetary policy indicator, like we show, we can solve some puzzle responses that the evidence suggests that we can have, but not by using the Divisa index. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's go next to Dr. Cheek. Do you have any comments for Fernando?
Sure, I think that was very interesting and very nicely presented. I guess my question is a follow-on to the question that was just asked. What is the implementation mechanism? What's the policy mechanism for implementing your findings in a real setting, whether in Mexico or elsewhere?
Right. That measure right now exists not only for, right now we're trying that it exists, that we have that measure for Mexico, but it already exists for the US and for the United Kingdom. And what we would like to do is that measure is published by the central bank, the Mexico Central Bank. And the researchers, they can use that Divisa Index as a monetary policy indicator to have a better understanding of the monetary policy implementation in Mexico. And we think that by doing that, we can broaden the measures or the variables that we can use in economics to understand better what is happening right now with the economy.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dean Holmes, would you like to add anything?
Oh yeah, so I have a little different question for you. So we're looking at cash savings checkings. What about, I'm reading that there's going to be a higher prevalence of digital assets. Maybe it's Bitcoin or some of the other cryptocurrencies. At what point would you need to start formally modeling them, or are they already included in your Divisa?
Right, that is a great question, Dr. Holmes, and we haven't considered that. We haven't considered that yet. We are just considering the usual or the common monetary assets that we have in the economy, but that would be very interesting if in the future we can consider those kind of, another measure of money, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. That's wonderful and important work. And next up, it's time for you, the audience, to get involved once again. We have another activity that'll help you practice, and so you can vote at the end of the competition. And if you participated in the last activity, you should be able to use the same text chain that you already started and simply answer the question that will be on the screen. But if you're just joining us, let me go over the directions one more time. You'll open the texting app on your smartphone and enter and start a new text. Then enter the numbers 37607 in the To section. Next, you'll type in UTD Research 004, where you would normally type a text and hit send. And then you'll receive a response back from Poll Everywhere, and that'll let you know you're ready to go with our next activity. So let's move on to the next Poll Everywhere question, and this is a true or false question for you. According to US News and World Report, UT Dallas ranks 5th among all Texas public universities, and we're seeing our responses come in real time, so you'll be texting A if you think the answer is true, that yes, UT Dallas ranks 5th among all Texas public universities, or B if you think that's false. And it looks like our audience is evenly divided. Let's see if the numbers change as the votes come in, because we're voting in real time, and let's see what happens. So we're going back and forth between true and false. And in just a second, I'm going to give you the answer. And the answer actually is false among the rankings for national universities, and that would be schools that offer a full range of undergraduate majors plus master's and doctoral programs and seek to produce groundbreaking research like what you're seeing here today. UT Dallas is number 143 overall and number 3 for public universities in Texas. So good job to all of you who voted. We know you'll be able to vote at the end of the competition as well. And now we're going to go on to our next contestant, and that's Brent Dell. Brent is a graduate student studying geospatial information sciences under the mentorship of Dr. May Wan. Brent, I hear you've driven to and spent time in 44 states. Can you tell us what your favorite places that you've visited on these many trips that you've taken?
Yes, so it's actually quite interesting because the favorite place that I like to visit is actually the grocery store. in every state. And this is just to get a feel of the local culture and the local people.
All right, well, I'll add that to my next vacation stop. I hadn't thought of that. So can you tell us a little bit about your research now?
Yeah, sure thing. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're interested in the space-time crime in Dallas, Texas. And specifically, we're trying to cluster crime based on what's called the varying density problem, or trying to solve the varying density problem. And it's this idea, basically, that crime that occurs in a single-family residential neighborhood is spaced apart differently than crime that occurs, say, in an apartment complex or in a commercial area. And so trying to solve this issue of varying density has been widely looked at in the field. And so the next few slides, I'm going to kind of highlight this issue and how our clustering algorithm that I'm presenting to you today attempts to solve this. So our main research question is, can we capture these crime clusters of varying density? And once we capture them, how do these the shape and movement of these clusters change over space and time? And what does that imply or say about the spatial temporal crime patterns in Dallas? And so there's a whole host of previous clustering methods that kind of already exist. And one of the more common ones in GIS is called the hotspot analysis. And hotspot analysis will show you areas of high and low crime activity in your area. However, there's a limitation with this. And the limitation is that you have to aggregate your event data set or your point data set to some kind of polygons, whether it's, as you see on the left, a arbitrary grid, or on the right, you can see parcel data. And this doesn't we argue that this doesn't accurately capture crime trends or cluster shapes. Some other types of clustering methods, such as k-means or dbScan, try to solve this by using a distance or density-based metric. However, the k-means clustering algorithm requires that you predefine the number of clusters ahead of time, so you have to know how many there's going to be, and it will assign every single event in your dataset to a cluster no matter what. The dbScan algorithm, however, will account for things like outliers or as well. However, it uses a single distance parameter for your entire data set. And so it doesn't solve this varying density problem, right? So we present what we call a space-time plume approach. And it's this idea that we're going to modify dbScan so that as it's moving through the data set, it will dynamically adjust its distance parameter based on what we feel is underlying spatial information. So we create these zones, and these zones have information about building density, about zoning information, such as like residential, commercial, industrial, etc., and land use information. So is it like a single family home? Is it a apartment complex, etc.? And we're going to create these three-dimensional clusters, which we call plumes. And they basically kind of, the plume term comes from this idea of it's like a cloud, and it has these volumes or shapes that it creates. And so let me show you some of these kind of results that we're getting here. And so the first question I asked was, can we capture crime clusters of varying density? And the answer is yes. And using a 21-day temporal interval here, you can see three-dimensional clusters. On the left, you see plumes in a single-family residential neighborhood in the southeast Dallas. And on the right, you see a variety of plumes of different shapes and sizes in the commercial district in downtown Dallas. And then we're asking, how do crime clusters change over space and time? And to look at this, we kind of had to relate plumes together. So we had to do what's called a hierarchical aggregation. So depending on the temporal interval we selected, the plumes would merge and become larger plumes. If you look at the image on the right, all of the plumes that you see here are the same plumes. However, on the right, we use a 21-day time interval, which is a relaxed temporal epsilon, versus the left shows a 14-day time interval. The image on the right shows all of the plumes that are teal colored actually became one larger plume in the relaxed temporal epsilon. So we can argue that those plumes in the 14-day interval should be related. And once we have this argument that they're related, we can look at how those clusters change in shape and move and et cetera over time. So we're continuing this research now that once we have these plumes, okay, what can we infer about the actual space-time crime that's happening in these plumes, right? And so our next research is actually looking at breaking down the actual crime events that occur in these plumes. And so on the right, you can see an image here of where we've highlighted violent versus nonviolent crime. And one of the main ideas we're looking at is, does violent crime shift to nonviolent crime in certain plumes, or is it the opposite? And then what do the plume shapes say about these shifts in crime types? And yeah, basically I want to thank my advisor, Dr. May Wan, for all her support, and the Dallas Police Department for access to this data, and I'm looking forward to continuing this research on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Let's see what our judges have to say about your research. Dr. Cheek?
Sure. Very nice presentation. I think you framed the problem and your approach very nicely. The question that is begged by this research is what practical implications do your results suggest for the current public debate on the way we structure policing?
Yes, so I'm actually in discussion right now with the Dallas Police Department about implementing these particular methods. In their crime analysis unit, they use the previous methods such as hotspot analysis for crime resource allocation and crime prevention methods. And we're trying to find ways where we can basically analyze neighborhoods that may be underserved or maybe not necessarily originally considered. And so that's kind of where this application is headed, or where it's headed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheek. Dean Holmes, do you have any questions or comments for Brent?
I do. I think I need to make an introduction because just earlier this month, I had a meeting with the Mesquite Police Chief who was looking precisely at new ways to evaluate the effectiveness of certain crime prevention things. So, they have some cameras that they can move around, both visual ones and then hidden ones, and they were trying to assess which had higher impact. So I guess the big question for this is, how do you think your method is going to help police agencies across the country really better evaluate different crime prevention efforts?
So I think one of the main important impacts here is that this crime algorithm that we presented is actually identifying areas that typically, like in a hotspot analysis, would be considered cold activity. And so it's basically not writing off areas predominantly based on a particular analysis. And it's this idea that, crime happens anywhere, and there's not one area that is more safe than another. So it's important to consider all of these areas and locations when police allocate resources. And so I think that's kind of what we're trying to propose here.
Thank you, Dean Holmes. Let's go next to Dr. Akporiaya. Do you have any comments or questions for Brent?
Yes, please. Thank you. I enjoyed your presentation, Brent. I thought the presentation of the antecedents was done really well. My question relates both to Dr. Holmes and Dr. Cheeks' question, and I'm wondering what priors or theoretical insights you are using to choose the neighborhoods for comparison, which obviously would affect the conclusions you can draw, right, from your research that can affect these debates that both Dr. Holmes and Dr. Cheeks have referred to. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the prior theoretical ideas was that crime was aggregated to administrative boundaries. And we're trying to break down this barrier that crime is not limited because there's a street or a river and the city limit, and then the crime stops. We think that crime can shift and move across administrative boundaries, and that actually bringing in multiple agencies and police departments from different areas to help solve the crime problem. And so that's kind of what our theoretical foundation is for this research.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Brent. Great job. And audience, it's time for another activity. And if you participated in the past, you're pros at this by now, and you know that you can use the same text chain that you already started and simply answer the question that's going to appear on the screen. But if you're just joining us, the graphic is going to tell you exactly what to do using Poll Everywhere on your smartphone, so you can participate in this activity, but more importantly, get some practice so you can vote for our winners at the end of this presentation. So we're now going to go to our next question, which you're going to see appear here on the screen in just a second. During the COVID-19 pandemic, how many face masks have UT Dallas researchers donated to area hospitals? Is it A, 550, B, 7,025, C, 10,212, or D, 12,070? So again, how many face masks have been donated by UT Dallas researchers to area hospitals during the COVID-19 pandemic? And we're seeing the results come in real time, and in just a minute you're gonna see the correct answer. Nobody's guessing 550, so I'm going to give you a hint and tell you that that's right. It's not 550. It's far, far more. And right now we're seeing C and D almost tied. And here comes the correct answer, 12,070. These donations were made to UT Southwestern, to Parkland, Methodist Richardson hospitals, and since the beginning of the pandemic, volunteers in the Make a Mask campaign have actually sewed over 1,800 masks for our on-campus essential workers. So a big thank you to the researchers and the staff volunteers for helping make such a big impact on our community. So we're about halfway through our competition. We have 3 down, 3 to go. And our next contestant is Marcella Nava. And she is a PhD student studying public policy and political economy under Dr. Richard Scotch. So welcome, Marcella. Let's get to know you just a little bit. Would you share with the audience why you chose UT Dallas to pursue your PhD?
Sure. UT Dallas is in the DFW area, and as somebody that also has a background in social work, I wanted to focus on public policy and how to apply an interdisciplinary approach to improve community health.
All right, well, now it's time for you to tell us a little bit about your research.
Sure. Okay. So it comes as no surprise to anybody that immigrants have been the target of significant anti-immigrant rhetoric and very restrictive policies over the past 2 and 3 decades, as well as an increase in recent years. At the same time, population health researchers have long pointed to findings of better health outcomes among immigrants as compared to their US-born socioeconomic counterparts. An apparent advantage which decreases with length of stay. Now, there is significant disagreement on the mechanisms behind this so-called immigrant paradox, but one thing that researchers do generally agree on is that social networks may help mediate some of the negative impacts of low socioeconomic status among immigrants. And as a result, there has been renewed interest in interventions that focus on the development of social capital, social networks that can bring value to immigrants. Now, the problem is that most research, most interventions focus on an understanding of immigrant health that compares immigrants with other groups based on socioeconomic status. But concepts of socioeconomic status generally tend to rely on factors such as education, income, or occupation that are all acquired primarily through US institutions. However, immigrants have very unique political, social, and economic circumstances that necessitate having a broader understanding of socioeconomic status. For example, some immigrants develop structured social networks through which they can function in a similar way as a rotating credit union outside of a US institution and providing significant economic value. So this study uses a grounded theory approach, which is an inductive approach designed to generate a conceptual framework, generate theory, and generate potential hypotheses that can lend themselves to empirical research. Specifically, this study set out to try to examine, to apply a political economy lens that takes into consideration the political economy of immigrants and examines socioeconomic status as a construct rather than as a variable, and looks at the different roles of human capital and social capital. So far, 15 structured interviews have taken place with gatekeepers in different organizations that contribute to human capital, such as education, healthcare, social work. Now, in keeping with a grounded theory approach, which can be a very lengthy process since it continues until reaching conceptual saturation, these 15 participants represent the initial proposed sample that was designed to try to generate a wide range of representatives from multiple organizations. Through an open coding process, grounded theory really gains its rigorous value through a very iterative process that continues by generating categories and then grouping those categories into a conceptual framework. The 3 primary themes that came out of this study were those of institution and gatekeepers, trauma, and collaboration in families. Institutions and gatekeepers were seen as contributing significant structural barriers and situational barriers. So while institutions may create specific eligibility criteria, may prioritize enforcement of immigration-related activities, gatekeepers can also create situational barriers for immigrants given their limitations. Trauma was also described as a significant impact associated with some of these exclusionary experiences, but many participants pointed to the role of collaboration as a way of having gatekeepers work around the structural barriers within their organizations and partner with community groups. Now, I could spend 10 minutes here and I won't. This is a conceptual framework that has emerged thus far. And the main thing I want to highlight is that institutions are seen as bringing both different barriers and opportunities depending on their institutional values. So looking at whether an institution is public or private, formal or informal, can have significant implications for creating collaborations that can actually take the place of human capital in order to leverage social and economic resources that can in turn impact health. The main takeaway from this study is the concept of governmentality, which is adapted from the writings of Michel Foucault, and here really neatly illustrates the way that the very institutions we rely on to improve population health, such as education and employment, can contribute to poor health. The implications here are that social capital can play a complementary role to human capital and really leverage itself into service delivery systems in new and innovative fashions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. So let's see what our judges have to say about your research. Dean Holmes, you want to go first?
You know, this is so interesting. It reminds me of some of the work I did with Dr. Miller and Dr. Keith on asylum outcomes. And one thing we found was a major determinant of their success or failure at getting the asylum status was whether or not there was a diaspora community. And there's something about that social network that unlocks so many more resources, whether it's, and you know, we never got to do the kind of research you're doing to find out precisely what are these mechanisms. Is it you can find a country expert on country conditions, or is there some other way to help people support, navigate, and make connections? So I just found this very, very fun. I wish I could have you do a follow-up on my study for me. There's just such richness here in this study and helping us uncover those causal mechanisms. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Holmes. Dr. Akporiaya, do you have any comments or questions for Marcella?
Yes, I have a couple of comments and then a quick question. First comment is, as an immigrant, this research has personal resonance for me, so thank you. And then for Dr. Holmes, I'm teaching human rights this semester, and I've actually assigned your paper with Dr. Keith and Dr. Miller for my students. We're talking about it next week, right? And so my question for you is, how do you think you could extend your main finding of governmentality to other issue areas relevant to the immigrant experience?
That's a great question. I think that the beauty of starting from the perspective of immigrants, given their unique circumstances, is that if we can uncover those mechanisms, we can extend that same understanding of governmentality to other groups that are also experiencing very unique political, social, and economic barriers. There's a lot of discussion about, for example, how people that were previously incarcerated may have their voting rights restricted, how the homeless population may experience significant types of barriers. And so by uncovering those mechanisms, I feel that we can bring a renewed understanding of social capital opportunities for other communities and help leverage health disparities research to develop a broader empirical base that we can then use to develop interventions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's go next to Dr. Cheek. Would you like to add anything?
Sure, yeah, I think this is, the topic is fascinating. I think it was nicely presented. I have just one question. You referenced, as I understood it, institutional effects from the policy and governance side that then flow through and have an effect on health status and health outcome. Are there, or have you explored whether there are institutional effects from the healthcare delivery side that would also have implications for outcomes?
Absolutely. There were healthcare organizations were a part of the sectors that were represented in this study, and participants described multiple barriers ranging as simple as whether the receptionist at a hospital was able and willing to communicate or contact an interpreter, all the way to instructions that were given to access pharmaceuticals and other treatments at organizations that simply didn't provide financial support for individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Marcella, and thank you, judges. And we're going to go to another activity now for the audience at home. And by now, you're all pretty familiar with Poll Everywhere, but if you're just joining us, this graphic on the screen will show you the process of how to participate in this activity and in the voting at the end of these presentations. So if you've already participated, you should be able to use the same text chain that you already started and simply answer the question that will be showing up next on our screen. And it's a really important question, maybe the most important question of the whole day, and that is, have you voted in the 2020 presidential election? And choose A if you voted early in person, B if you're voting via mail-in ballot, C, you'll be voting on election day, and D, you'll not be voting in this election. Hopefully that's just because you're not a citizen. So let's see what happens here. And while you're submitting your votes, I'm going to share a fun fact and say, as it did in 1789, the U.S. still uses the electoral college system established by the U.S. Constitution, which today gives all American citizens over the age of 18 the right to vote for electors, who in turn vote for the president. So the president and vice president are the only elected federal officials chosen by the electoral college instead of by direct popular vote. So we know there are some people out there that are not U.S. citizens and therefore cannot vote. But look at that, 61% had participated in person early voting, and still over 50% as those numbers change. So while there's not a reveal of a correct answer, we hope everyone will get out and vote in this election, and be sure to vote for your favorite contestant at the end of this competition. So we are going to be moving on now to our next finalist, and I invite you to give a warm welcome to Leslie Staniland. And Leslie is a graduate student studying public policy and political economy under the mentorship of Dr. Jonas Bunte. And Leslie, you shared an interesting fact, and that is that you have camped at 15 different state parks. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think Caprock Canyons is probably my favorite, only because, well, in Texas, we don't get many hills. And so the parts of far west Texas and the Panhandle where it can get a little scenery, to me is the most beautiful part of Texas, other than the hill country, which is the prettiest part of Texas. But then Caprock Canyons is probably the next.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Now, will you tell us a little bit about your research?
Absolutely, I sure will. All right. Thank you, Dr. Lanham, for the gracious introduction. Also, a big thank you to Anrika and Suzanne at the Office of Research for putting on this competition. I'm honored to be a part of it. This research analyzes an area critical to international political economy, but one that's sometimes overlooked, which is informal economic activity, or economic activities that are conducted without register. So, for example, look at the left-hand side. You have people here, they're paying for fruit at a street stall. They're paying with cash. There are no receipts. There are no taxes being collected. There's no paperwork. And, well, is this situation good or bad? After all, informal economic activity is a way for people to make money, especially if they have no other alternative. However, you can see here, these jobs have no security. They have no benefits. There are low barriers to entry, which then probably put a downward pressure on prices. And Furthermore, these employees, when they go home at the end of the day, they have cash in their pockets. They might be an attractive target for thieves. And so the graphic at the right shows the variation of informal economic behavior aggregated at the continent level. And of particular note, and what really drives this research, is the large variation that we see in Africa and Asia, two continents that both have developed and developing countries. And so I want to find out what might be causing this variation. So I want to see the effect specifically that oil may have on a country's informal economy. Most existing work focuses on domestic factors such as tax rates, government effectiveness, and use those as predictors for informal economic activity. However, it can be argued that oil rents also affect those same variables. And so the resource curse literature analyzes these types of mechanisms extensively. And however, the informal economy literature focuses mainly on domestic determinants like taxes or government effectiveness. So my contribution to this literature is that the makeup of the domestic informal economy can also be distorted by oil rents and not just the formal economy. Well, one of the most robust findings in the informal economy literature is that as tax rates go up, informal activity also goes up as a method to avoid the increased taxation. Well, it could be that people are simply responding rationally. They want to keep more of their own money, and if the government wants to increase taxes, they act to avoid the tax. It also could be that people start to hide their income from the government if they don't believe the monies are being spent wisely. After all, if public infrastructure is crumbling and social services are slight or non-existent, then why would someone continue to pay taxes since it's quite clear that the money's being misspent? My findings suggest, however, that lower taxes may actually lead to a larger informal economy because of the influence of oil rents. And this is because of the rentier effect, in which governments use oil rents as a substitute for taxation. After all, taxation may be opposed by the people or powerful interest groups, but oil rents can take away that difficult decision from government so that they don't have to make these difficult choices. So according to the current understanding of taxes and informal behavior, a decrease in taxes ought to lead to a lower informal economic activity. But I show that oil rents distort this traditional mechanism, and instead of lower levels of taxation leading to lower informal activity, oil rents will in fact cause an increase in informal activity. So this plot shows the results for all available developing countries from 2000 to 2016 with data taken from the World Bank. There's a positive and significant effect of oil rents on informal behavior, which I measured via confirmatory factor analysis. The difficulty in measuring informal activity is that by definition, it's not counted, and so it's not measurable. So advanced methods have been used throughout the literature, such as structural equation modeling, to construct a latent variable that estimates the unobservable phenomenon. I use excess cash, rule of law, and GDP growth as my indicators of informal activity and construct a central dependent variable. We see that taxes are insignificant for developing countries, and while government effectiveness leads to a smaller informal economy, as we would expect, while the control variables such as control of corruption and urban population are significant and in the expected direction. This plot shows the interaction effect of taxes and oil rents for developing countries. So I theorize that at lower levels of taxation, oil rents should have a positive and significant effect on the informal economy, and that's what we see here. Furthermore, at higher levels of taxation, the effect becomes insignificant, as expected given the rentier effect. So this is evidence that oil rents do act on the informal economy through a specific channel, in this case, direct taxes. However, it could be the case that oil rents can act through government effectiveness and not taxes. So I ran the same analysis, not shown here, but on government effectiveness, and there was no evidence that oil rents influence the informal economy through a country's effectiveness metric, but rather through its tax rate measurement. Thank you for your time and attention. What questions do you have for me?
Well, thank you, Leslie. I'm sure that our judges do have some questions for you. So let's go first to Dr. Cheek. Dr. Cheek?
Sure. Yeah. Very interesting topic, nicely presented. But think when you were presenting that one of the things when I moved from Dallas to Chicago, one of the things I was surprised to miss were garage sales. So I suppose that factors into your informal economy in some way. Can you just out of curiosity, the example you and potentially these types of sort of informal garage and house sales, are there other examples of the informal economy that are more prevalent than others that factor into this?
It's a really good question, Dr. Cheek, and it's not in this particular piece of research, but it's something I want to deal with as part of my broader research agenda, is that there seems to be enough evidence out there to suggest that the informal economy literally does behave differently in developed and developing countries. And so in developed countries, you're more likely to see garage sales, bartering, this sort of stuff. Whereas in developing countries, it really is the livelihood. They're selling goods or services, and it's not a complement to their quote unquote day job. It is their day job, and so that is sort of one of the really interesting aspects of informal behavior, is that it's so different. There's so much variation across country.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go next to Dean Holmes. Dean Holmes, do you have any comments or questions for Leslie?
I do. So I'm wondering, Les, I know you're a policy guy at heart. So what kind of policies do you think exist that actually make it harder to hire people informally and to encourage or really restrict companies and other businesses to forcing to hire people in a formal manner? I'm thinking back to, there were a few changes, one in banking and one in a different area in Colombia, that made it exceedingly difficult to have people work under the table, that they had to be part of the formal economy. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts, or if you'd come across some best practices there.
Yes, and a lot of it will probably have to do with developed economies that will have those sorts of protections, job protections, whether they be labor unions or some sort of laws that promote job benefits and such like. In what I see when I study Ghana, part of my dissertation is a case study of Ghana, and how have they adapted to how have their policies changed because of their finding oil back in 2007. And it really seems to be that they've done a decent job of attempting to mitigate the effects. And I think a lot of that has to do with, they've got their relative neighbors in Angola and Nigeria that really mismanaged their oil wealth. And so there was a really concerted effort in my research, the politicians, the speeches, the budgets, to really avoid letting oil replace taxation or start to lead to corruption. And so, Ghana did it right. That doesn't mean it's perfect. I mean, there's still some corruption, but comparatively, they have done a really good job in coming up with those policies to avoid slacking into informal behavior.
All right, well, thank you. And we're going to go next to Dr. Akporiaya. And do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie, for your presentation. I was looking forward to your presentation because your research intersects with some areas of mine. So my question, okay. Yes, definitely reach out. My question is, how did you back into oil as a predictor of informal economic activity, right? And are you controlling for resource dependence or oil reserves in your models?
So oil reserves, when I look at oil FDI, which wasn't part of this presentation, I do control for that. In this particular analysis, I didn't, and that can be an improvement that I can make going forward. But how did I come about it? It just, as I was doing research in natural resources, which I guess I probably have been interested in even before I started the program, the effect of oil and the effect that it can have on an economy. And so originally I was looking at the gig economy and how that was becoming a larger part of developed or developing economies, and it just sort of came together. It wasn't I don't know if it was necessarily anything that I specifically did. It's just sort of an aha moment that, hey, wait a minute, it might make sense that oil might, we know it affects the domestic economy. Well, what if it affects the informal economy as well?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to our judges. And we're on to our next activity. And by now, most of you are familiar with Poll Everywhere, but in case you're just joining us, you're going to see the graphic on the screen that will show you how to participate in this activity, and more importantly, in the voting at the end of this competition. So if you've already participated in a previous activity, you'll just use the same text chain and simply answer the question that's about to pop up here on the screen. And it's one more trivia question. And for this one, you'll just type in your best guess in the text field and then go ahead and push submit, similar to how you did before. And as you see, the question is, how many total service hours were reported by our Office of Student Volunteerism, Fraternity and Sorority Life, and Student Affairs staff in the 2019-2020 academic year? And I was going to give you a hint, but the votes are coming in. So for those of you who haven't voted yet, the hint is it is more than 15,000. So these numbers are rather low. That shows you how active our community is in volunteering and helping those in need. In fact, we just had a Viva Volunteer event this last weekend, and we're getting all kinds of answers here: 33,000, 11,000, 15,500, and basically, while we watch the guesses come in, I just want to give you a few facts about one of the services that we offer here at UT Dallas, and that's the Comment Cupboard. The Comment Cupboard is a UTD food pantry initiative, and it's dedicated to helping students in need. In fact, its primary mission is to provide food and personal care items to members of our UT Dallas community. And we're anticipating food and personal care item shortages during the coming weeks, as you can imagine. So we hope you'll get involved and help us to feed our hungry comets. So visit oue.utdallas.edu/cupboard to learn what items are needed, or if you want to have information on donating online. So the correct answer, you just saw someone who got very, very close. It's 17,140 service hours. And of course, that's outstanding. And we're very proud of our campus community for all the volunteer hours they have logged in this year. So thank you to everyone who contributes to the Comment Cupboard and volunteers in many different capacities around the community. So we have one more contestant before you will have a chance to do the Poll Everywhere for real by casting your vote. And let's give a warm welcome to Yanan Wu. And Yanan is a PhD student studying geospatial information sciences under the mentorship of Dr. Mei Wan. So Yanan, tell me a little bit about why you chose to study geospatial information sciences.
Yes, because I love this major because I could use different data to get the various information about the Earth, like the urban sprawl, the weather, and how human move. It's very interesting.
All right, well, thank you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your research now?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to share with you my research here. So my research is about the spatial temporal analysis of traffic accidents in Dallas. According to the traffic accident survey, we know that the traffic accident become one of the ways that threaten our lives. And the number of people who were killed in traffic accidents is still increasing. So a number of factors contribute to traffic accidents, like the freeway intersection, the circular junction, or bad weather, rainy or storm. So in order to prevent and improve this situation, we need to understand where the traffic accidents occur, when they occur, and why. We study traffic accidents in Dallas City, This city has a complex freeway and expressway, and this city has been ranked as the 9th most dangerous city for the drivers in the United States. We use two data sources. First one is traffic accident data, which from 2010 to 2018, 9 years in total. Second one is point of interest, POI. POI is a specific point location on the Earth. It includes different categories, like the bank, store, restaurant, etc. So the basic idea in our study is that we want to find the persistent reoccurrence location, or we can call dangerous location. It means, do we have a place that have traffic accident occurred in specific hour? For example, do we have a place where traffic accidents tended to occur on Monday 8 a.m. in every year from 2010 to 2018? So our study is based on the each hour throughout the day of the week, so 168 groups in total. And next, we use the POI data and a priori algorithm to find out the relationship between the feature around the traffic accidents and the dangerous location. So based on the data and the methodology, we got the temporal pattern. The weekday and the weekends have a distinctive pattern. On weekdays, we found out that the dangerous location usually occur in the morning, 6 to 9 a.m., and afternoon, 4 to 6 p.m. However, it's different on weekend. The weekend usually occur, the dangerous location usually occur in early morning, especially at 2 a.m. So this animation shows the special pattern for the traffic accidents shown in different time period. From 6 to 1 p.m., we found that most of traffic accidents centered in the downtown. 2 p.m. number of accidents decreased. 3 p.m. the I-635 expressway has a traffic accident start from 4. The traffic accident spread towards southern part. 5 p.m. traffic accident widely spread across Dallas. 6 p.m. the downtown has a concentrated traffic accident. 7 p.m. we found that only one traffic accident near the expressway. 8 p.m. only Friday has a dangerous location, and the 9 p.m. same with the 8 p.m. 10 p.m. we found just a few traffic accidents in the downtown. This is a special pattern based on weekday. Next one is based on weekend. The Saturday and the Sunday not only has a similar temporal pattern, they also have a similar spatial pattern, so it's interesting here. This animation shows that Sunday in the early morning, especially in the downtown, and until noon, just a few traffic accidents in downtown. And in the afternoon, 1 to 3, several from north to south, and 4 to 7, some concentrated on the I-635, and at night, several concentrated in the downtown and the only one in the southern part. So based on the temporal pattern and the spatial pattern, we understand where and when they occur. And next, the rules, the a priori algorithm provides the relationship between feature and the traffic accident. We found that the frequent feature like entertainment, nightlife, and store, they usually occurred around the traffic accident location. And we also compared this feature is the location that with the traffic accident but low frequent. And this location is without the traffic accident. We found that there's no frequent feature related to them. So our study understands where, when, and why the traffic accident occur. In the future, we want to employ this algorithm into other surveys, like we want to find out the safety route for the emergency service. And thank you.
Thank you, Yanan. Let's see what the judges have to say about your research. Let's go first to Dr. Akpoporia.
Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation, Yanan. Your presentation reminded me that I don't miss the DFW traffic, but I do miss the wide, big, and smooth DFW roads, right? So my question for you is, what are the policy implications of your findings? So how can the local government act on your findings, and perhaps what could it do for commuters to know this information?
Yes, you mean what kind of policy can implication in my study?
Yes, please.
Yes. I found that on the weekend, the late night, many of traffic accidents occur on the expressway. So maybe it's related to the alcohol and the drug activity. So maybe at even night like late night, we need to publish some policy to constrain this kind of activity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go next to Dr. Cheek. Dr. Cheek, do you have any questions or comments for Yaman?
Sure, yeah. I too am traumatized by memories of Dallas traffic. My question is these locations that are, presumably the incidence of traffic accidents is because of some traffic density, maybe. And so I'm curious whether there's a spatial correlation with proximity to public transportation that would get people out of their cars and maybe have an effect on the likelihood of a location becoming high risk.
Yes, we found that in front of the parking lot, like the public parking lot, the frequency of traffic accident is higher than the normal location, and like the restaurant also has the significant impact on the traffic accident. So I thought that this location has some significant impact, and the people need to notice this location.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Thank you. And Dean Helms, we'll give you the final word on Yaman's research. Do you have any questions or comments for her?
Well, I tell you, if I were police chief of Dallas Police Department, I know exactly where I'd set up sobriety checks. That might do a great job to reduce some of these accidents. But I do have kind of on another aspect. I was wondering if you have any follow-up plans to do a deep dive into these dangerous areas and see if there's something physically about that road or maybe an intersection beyond traffic volume that makes an area more likely to have such a concentration of accidents. So is there a way you can help define dangerous areas better because of this research?
Yeah, so we also have the data about the road segment, like the number of lanes, the lane-wise. And we found that the number of lanes and the lane-wise, after we do the analysis, we found that there's two factors, the physical constructor, make the important impact on the traffic accident.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, all 6 of our contestants have battled it out, and now you out in the audience get to pick the winners of today's competition. So by now you're very familiar with this graphic. If you've been with us from the beginning, if you're just joining us, it will show you exactly how to vote. And of course, those of you who have been practicing, you should be able to use the same text chain that you already started to vote, when you voted in previous polls and also answered the previous questions. So now you get to vote for the top 3 contestants. So let's remember who we're voting for here. We've got, will you vote for Janine Alpert, who's studying public policy and political economy, or Luis Fernando Calunga Ramos, who is studying economics? Or will you be voting for Brent Dell, who's studying geospatial information sciences? Or maybe Marcela Nava, who is studying public policy and political economy? We also have Leslie Stanneland, who's studying public policy and political economy. Or will you vote for Yanan Wu, studying geospatial information sciences? So this is your chance. You get to start casting your votes now by sending in an A for Janine Alpert, a B for Luis Fernando Calunga Ramos, C for Brent Dell, D for Marcela Nava, and E for Leslie Stoneland, and F for Yanan Wu. And we see the results coming in real time. But we will have to do some calculating as you vote for your top 3 contestants, and it's interesting to watch the voting come in. But we will be taking a short commercial break. We'll leave the polls open and keep them open for a couple of minutes, but we will be tallying the votes and be back with Dean Holmes, who will be announcing our winners. Welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to announce that we have tallied all the votes, and Dean Jennifer Holmes is ready to announce our winners of today's Research Showcase poster competition. Take it away, Dean Holmes.
All right, well, in order, I'll start with the honorable mentions. So each of our honorable mentions will receive a prize of $50. So first honorable mention goes to Janine Alpert. We also have Marcela Nava and Yanan Wu. So those are our 3 honorable mentions. Each of them will receive a prize of $50. So congratulations. There's a lot of quality here, and I know it was a very tough decision. Third place is going to Les Stanilin. So Les gets a prize of $100. So congratulations, Les. And a little bit of a drum roll here, because I know we're down to 2. So I'm going to draw it just a tiny bit. Second place is going to go to Brent Dell. So congratulations, Brent. You earned a prize of $300. And that means our winner is Luis Fernando Colunga Ramos. Congratulations, Fernando. Your prize is $500. This has been a delightful competition. It's been so good. I think it's definitely hard for us to have picked winners. But congratulations and thank you all for those of you who participated. And of course, the fantastic staff at Office of Research.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Dean Holmes, and congratulations to our winners and to all of the finalists who participated in our show today. You all did an amazing job. And audience, thank you so much for watching and voting. And we have a big thanks for our production crew that made all of this possible through their hard work. And we'll be seeing you again in the spring for another round of Research Showcase poster competition. And this time we'll be showcasing the talent and hard work of students in the School of Arts and Humanities. So hope to see some of you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.